From preschoolers to teens, in this video I'm going to show you some of my top recommendations, as well as give you some advice as to what I believe make the best binoculars for young children, slightly older grade school kids, as well as teenagers. And we're going to start right now. Hello and welcome to Best Binocular Reviews. My name is Jason. You know, I started the BBR website before my daughter was born. She is now almost 9 years old. And so during that time, I've watched her go from this tiny little toddler that would hold up a pair of toilet paper rolls up to her eyes to imitate me, to the point where she can now competently use many of the binoculars that I have in for testing and review. So I can speak from personal experience when I say that having your children involved in what you're interested in is really rich and rewarding. And this is especially true if it's educational as well. Think about it. What could be better than having your children playing outdoors and at the same time learning about nature and wildlife? Exactly which binocular you get will largely depend on the age of your child as well as their general experience in using a pair of optics, which I will go through in order in this video. However, to save you having to watch all the age categories that aren't relevant to you, I will add timeline links down in the description below, just so you can skip to the point that interests you the most. But before you go, just hold on a bit. I just want to share with you some general advice as well as recommendations and things that you should be looking out for to make sure you get the right binoculars for your kids, no matter what age they are. So how much should you spend on a pair of binoculars for your kids? This is a personal and in many cases a relative option, as what you and I may think is expensive will be considered pretty cheap to someone like Bill Gates or Elon Musk. So I can't give you an exact figure, but I can offer you a few words of advice. Firstly, you should try and avoid the very cheapest binoculars in any age class, as they are often so bad that they will usually just end up frustrating your child and eventually put them off using binoculars altogether. Then secondly, I would also say that you should only go for a pair that you can easily afford to replace. This is especially true for younger kids. So whilst the best child-specific binoculars are designed with the fact that they will inevitably be dropped, they still contain delicate optics within them, which can become misaligned no matter how tough you build the exterior. When it comes to the magnification, I can't stress enough that you should avoid high-powered binoculars. This is especially important for very young kids, but even for teenagers, an 8x magnification should be the maximum for almost all handheld uses. So whilst it might sound exciting to have a very powerful binocular, and you may think that you will see more, there are many downsides to higher magnifications, even for adults, but which have an even greater impact when a young person is using the device. Firstly, any movement that you make when looking through a pair of binoculars gets amplified by the magnification, and therefore high-powered binoculars make it much harder for you to keep the image steady and shake-free. So as you probably know, kids find it hard to remain still at the best of times. And on top of this, they tend to have far less stable hands than adults. So having a high-powered binocular means there's got much more chance of all they're going to be able to see is a blurry, shaky image, and it won't take long for them to get bored and give up. The size of the shaft of light exiting the eyepieces on a binocular is known as the exopupil. Now, if you have two binoculars with the same size objective lenses, but one is a higher power and the other a lower power, it is the lower powered binocular that will have a larger exopupil and thus a larger shaft of light coming out of the ocular lenses. Why is this important? Well, it's important for everyone, but especially for children, because if you have a large shaft of light coming out the back of the binoculars, for one, it makes an image potentially more bright and it will definitely have a better performance in low light. But on top of that, it makes it much easier to line up your eyes with those shafts of light. So for a child who perhaps doesn't have as much experience as an adult, it makes it much easier for them to line up their eyes with the image coming out of the actual back of the binocular. And thus they have a much better chance of seeing the full image without any black rings forming on the edges of the view. Please note, if at any time I mention a feature or technical term that you don't fully understand, please feel free to just pause the video and take a look down in the description where I have links to the BBR website where there are full and detailed explanations. Another major advantage to keeping the powers of your binocular down is that a lower powered binocular will almost invariably also have a wider field of view. Now this is important for everyone, but once again is especially important for kids. This is because a wider view or a bigger image where you're seeing more of the scenery in front of you just makes it that much easier for your child to locate whatever it is they're trying to find, through the binoculars. On top of this, a wider image also makes it much easier to follow your object, especially if it's moving. So for a child, for birds, for example, that may be erratic and quite small, if they're moving about in a tree, a wide view just makes it much easier for them to follow because they don't have to move the binoculars as much to keep up with the action. Binoculars with large objective lenses are able to capture and let in more light, and therefore they have the potential to produce brighter, better quality views. However, as you can see with these large Fujinon 7x50 marine binoculars, the disadvantage is they're far bigger and heavier. Now, even a standard size 42mm binocular, like these Hawk EDXs, are optimized for adult-sized hands, and therefore a child will find it quite difficult to hold on to, but especially difficult to actually turn and adjust the focus wheel. So whilst they may not perform as well, I would still recommend that you opt for a pocket or compact size binocular for a younger child, and then possibly move up to a mid-size binocular for teenagers. This will not only make it easier for them to carry, but easier to hold up to their face and keep steady, as well as adjust the focus wheel. Another reason for choosing a smaller binocular is to ensure that the eyepieces can be positioned close enough together to accommodate the smaller face and thus closer set eyes on a child. If you do decide to get a binocular that hasn't been designed specifically with children in mind, this is certainly something to keep an eye out for. Most manufacturers will advertise both the maximum and minimum IPD distances. Thus, all you need to do is to measure the distance between the centers of your child's eyes and make sure that the binoculars you choose can fold down to this distance or less. Right, so now that we know what we are looking for, we have now reached the point where I can finally show you a few recommendations based on the age of your child. As I mentioned a bit earlier on in the video, I will also create some timeline links down in the description below that will allow you to skip to the age range of your particular child. So to begin with, we're going to start with children, very young children, of ages about 4 to 7 years old. Now here, the exact age will largely depend on the maturity of your child, and as I said, just how used they are to using binoculars or having binoculars around them. So for instance, my daughter, she was easily able to use binoculars at about 3 years old. But, she is, I don't think, typical in the fact that she just grew up with binoculars all around her and seeing me use them all the time. So I would say about 4 years is probably a good place to start. Everyone else maybe have a different opinion, but that's just mine. Anyway, at this age, what I will say is I think it's really important that you do get yourself, get your child a binocular that is specifically designed for kids. I mean, a quick search on the web, you will see thousands, if not tens of thousands, that are described as children's binoculars, but in reality they're nothing more than really cheap and nasty adults binoculars, just disguised as kids binoculars. So my recommendation to start off with are these binoculars made by Bresser, the German brand Bresser, which has a reasonably good reputation of building high quality, a wide range of optics. And these are built under license for National Geographic. They come with a 6x magnification and 21mm objective lenses. The 6x magnification, very moderate, which as we've spoken about earlier on, is perfect for young people. Just makes it much easier for them to keep the image steady, and also just facilitates a nice wide field of view, which really helps them make it much easier for them to lock onto whatever they're trying to observe. On top of this particular binocular has a polycarbonate shell, which at this price level, pretty much all binoculars will. If I was going for a more expensive binocular, it would be something I'd be complaining about. But at this price level, and for a child, this is perfect. And the fact that it just keeps the weight down, and this particular instrument is extremely lightweight. On top of this, the actual shape and design of the binocular, it's nice and compact, and thus perfect for little hands to hold on to. If I had one slight gripe, it would be with the rubber coating. Whilst it's nice and colourful, so they will definitely be attracted to that, for my liking, it's just a little bit too thin, and so it doesn't offer quite as much impact protection as I particularly would have liked. The next age range that I have is for kids from about between 7 and about 10 years old. So this happens also to be the age range where my daughter currently is. And what I have found with her is she's sort of outgrown these kids binoculars, and she finds them a little bit childlike or babyish. Once again, this may just be because she sees me using adults binoculars, and I have binoculars around me all the time. But I have found that she sort of yearns for something a bit more like what I use and wanted something a little bit more serious. Also, because she's had quite a lot of experience in using binoculars, I found that she was perfectly capable, or is perfectly capable, in using an adult's pair of binoculars, but one that has all the features that are suitable for children. So what I mean is that you're still looking for a binocular that is small and lightweight, and with a lower magnification as possible. Now, the problem is most adults binoculars usually come with a minimum of about 8 times magnification. I mean, you can find some binoculars out there that have 7 times, and there's some really good options out there, but they quite often are quite expensive binoculars. So my advice would be to look for a binocular that's fairly cheap. As I said before, you want something that when they get dropped, not if they get dropped, when they get dropped, that and if they happen to get broken, you can replace them without too much worry. Of course, you're going to try and make sure that they don't do this, but you know, mistakes will happen. So I have 2 binoculars here that I would recommend. These Levenhuks with an 8 times magnification, you know, are on the edge, but I found with my daughter, she is able to hold them steady enough and enjoys using this. Obviously, these Levenhuks come in a variety of colors, from greens to blues to purples, and that's what initially drew her to these actual binoculars. They are fairly inexpensive, and another thing that I really do like about them is because these compact binoculars have a twin hinge design over here. What you can see is if I open and close them like this, the eyepieces can be positioned very close together. And in this way, your child has definitely will be able to line them up with their eyes, and it will accommodate really small faces. The weight of the binoculars is perhaps a touch on a little bit on the heavy side. It's not something that I say quite often about compact binoculars, but for a child, you know, aren't completely made out of plastic, so they are a little bit heavier than something like this. But having said that, the design again has these little barrels over here, which are perfect for a little kid's hands to hold on to. So these are a pair of binoculars that I do recommend. And as you can see, these are quite grubby. And that's literally because my daughter uses these probably most out of any other binocular that she can get her hands on. The other pair that I have were sent to me quite recently by the Chinese brand Svbony, I think you say it. Now, I've seen these on the web, or the brand on the web, a lot, and to be honest, because they mostly sell really cheap binoculars, I've avoided them. But because I knew I was going to do this video and do some recommendations, when they contact me, I told them specifically told them that I would really like to try out this pair, just because I would like to give my daughter a chance, just so that I could, because I had an inkling that I thought these would be perfect for her. And I'm really glad that I did, because costing about $20, you know, so it's really, really cheap. I think it's about the same in pounds. A really cheap pair of binoculars. Again, they're super lightweight, you know, mostly plastic parts, obviously got glass lenses in that, so they are proper working binoculars. There's a couple of things that I really do like about them. First of all, and probably most importantly, they don't have a focus wheel. So these are fixed focus binoculars. The thing basically is how that works is that they have a really long depth field of view. So for instance, everything from about, I think it's about 15 meters or so. I was trying to convert from feet to meters, but from about 10 to 15 meters will be in focus from everything from there up right until infinity. So the great thing for kids is, you know, and I find that's one of the hardest thing that a kid has to deal with is changing the focus, because they don't quite understand that if you're looking at something close or something far, that you have to adjust the focus wheel. And that's one thing that for me is a slight issue with many kids' binoculars, and it's something that's a real bonus with these, is that they don't have to change focus. They just lift their eyes up and they're able to see pretty much what they want to look at. Again, these are 8 times magnification, so on the edge of what I would recommend. But yeah, super easy to use, nice and comfortable, and as you can see here, they do close up close enough that most children, I'm pretty sure, will be able to line up their eyes over here. So this is, for me, is a really good option. $20, you can't go wrong. And to be fair, the quality of the view, I was surprised at. For $20, I would recommend these, absolutely, for a child, an older 7 to 10 years old, and perhaps even older. You know, as I said, it will depend. Right, so next up, I just want to take a look at the age groups of children a little bit older, so about 10 years old to early teenage years. So here I think as the child gets older and older, they will start to yearn for something more and more serious and find something that's specifically designed for kids or very young kids, so they won't want to use it. And so here I've got a number of recommendations. Initially, you'll see that these Vortex binoculars look very similar to the really cheap ones that I recommend for younger children. But they are different in the fact that it's just a little bit step up in terms of the quality, overall build quality, as well as the quality of the optics. Now, I think as your child gets a little bit older, they can be trusted a little bit more, hopefully, in that there's less chance of them just dropping the pairs of binoculars. So I feel that it could be worth it, depending on your child, to spend that just a little bit more money to get some better quality optics, just so that the experience that they have when using the binoculars is better. Now, this particular binocular that I have from the Vortex Vanquish, I actually bought for myself for a camping trip that I was going on, and I sort of wanted to test a cheapish compact binocular. It was only when we went camping and my daughter started using them that I suddenly thought to myself, these binoculars would be really, really good for a kid. And so the actual model that I have here is the 10 by 26, which I wouldn't ordinarily suggest for a child. Again, the magnification is just a little bit too high in my opinion. What I would definitely suggest is Vortex make an 8 by 26 Vanquish, which will be way better. For a start, as we've gone through earlier, the lower power means you get a wider field of view, just makes it that much easier for your child to lock on to whatever they're trying to look at. The lower power also means that you get a larger exit pupil, so you get a brighter, better quality view, which is always a good thing. And lower power also just means it's that much easier they're still quite unsteady hands, shaky hands, to keep still. So this is a great binocular, in my opinion, for kids. As I said, it's going to be far more expensive than these. You're looking at about $100, just under $100, £100, somewhere like that, depending on what currency you're looking at. So it's a bigger investment, but I do feel that once your child has got this, as I said, I bought this for myself, and it's perfectly fine. As long as they look after them, this could last them, all through their teenage years and on into the future. Right. So lastly, I just wanted to talk about some binoculars that I feel could be suitable for teenagers. Obviously, some of the instruments that we've already spoken about, so these Vortex Vanquish binoculars, for example, would still be ideal. However, I just wanted to expand upon it a little bit and explain why for some kids, a slightly larger binocular may be a better option. So far, all the binoculars that we've looked at have been small compacts, obviously ideally suited to younger children with small hands. However, as your child begins to grow and obviously their hands become larger, there is the opportunity to move up a level and therefore obtain a binocular that is slightly larger and therefore has a wider operating range and will perform better in low light conditions and potentially produce a brighter, better quality view. So whilst I still wouldn't suggest going out and getting a full-size 42mm binocular, and indeed some mid-size binoculars will still be a bit too heavy for them to easily manage, there are some designs of mid-size binocular that would be, I feel, ideal for teenagers. So for example, here in my hands I have these Steiner Predator 8x30 binoculars. Now, whilst I wouldn't ordinarily put these forward as the first choice, as the ideal binocular for a teenager, largely down to the fact that it's quite an expensive pair of optics and the fact that it's primarily designed for hunting. So unless your particular interest with your child was actually to go out hunting, this wouldn't be my first choice. However, I just would like to use it as an example and show you that the particular design and shape of the binocular would be ideal for some teenagers. The combination of these mid-sized 30mm objectives, along with this poroprism design and shape, makes for a binocular that's really easy and simple to use for both young people and indeed anyone who has smaller hands. They're just really comfortable, super comfortable and easy to use. So there's a couple of binoculars that I will link to, as well as perhaps put an image somewhere here on the screen that I would highly recommend. I don't have the examples, unfortunately, with me, and the fact that they've gone back to the manufacturers. But there's the Opticron Savannah WP 6x30 and the Kowa YF 6x30. Now, the fantastic thing about both those binoculars is, firstly, they both use polycarbonate shells, making them really lightweight. And then on top of that, you've got the moderate 6 times magnification, which, as we have spoken about, produces a really wide field of view, making it much easier for your child to follow and view and pick up whatever it is they want to look for. On top of that, it just makes it so much easier for them to keep that image still and steady and thus get a much better view of what they're trying to see. And lastly, obviously, the extra pupil is going to be nice and large, and therefore the binocular will perform well even in very low light conditions. And then finally, we have binoculars like this Bresser Pirsch 8x34. So here we have the slightly larger 34mm objective lenses, but still not too large. So we still have a pretty small compact binocular, perfect for smaller hands that a teenager would have. But one of the primary reasons I'm putting this forward as a good option for a teenager is the fact that the actual design and shape of the binocular. So firstly, they use a polycarbonate shell, which, as we've spoken about, is really nice and lightweight, which is really important. But on top of that, it's the actual open bridge body design. So the combination of these mid-sized 34mm objectives mean that the barrels themselves don't have a diameter that's too big, so they're nice and easy to hold on to, perfect for smaller hands. But they also have the space in between the two actual bridges, which makes for a really secure area for a person with small hands to hold on to, and therefore hopefully not drop quite as easily. On top of that, this particular binocular has a really large focus wheel. Indeed, it's the same size as that they use on the full-size instrument. So this just makes it that much easier to use, to reach and adjust. So binoculars like this, I feel, make a really good option for teenagers, perhaps older teenagers, but nevertheless, it's well worth considering in my opinion. So there you go. I do hope that this video has been both useful and interesting to you. If it has, I would really appreciate a thumbs up. On top of that, if you want to make sure that you don't miss out on any content that I upload in the future, please be sure to subscribe, and if possible, hit that little bell button on the side. This is something that really does help both myself and my channel bring you more and more content in the future, and I appreciate all the help and support that I get from you guys. So having said all that, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Cheers for now.